Welcome into another edition of the Throwing Chairs podcast. We've got a lot to cover today. We're going to look back on the Empire Classic out in New York City, take a look at Sunday's matchup against Harvard up in Indianapolis, and then cover the first Big Ten game of the season against the Maryland Terrapins, which will take place Friday night. But before we get started, introduce everybody. I'm Hayden Smith alongside Audrey Marr, Thomas Montalbano, and our special guest, Zion Brown, back here in the Throwing Chairs podcast. He has deferred over to the IndyStar for now. He's our insider, but Zion, it's great to have you back.
Oh man, it is great to be back. I'm honored to be the inaugural special guest, as I just learned moments ago. Glad to be back on it and just ready to talk some IU men's basketball.
Hey, one of the greatest basketball minds that we have here on campus. It's a lofty statement, but I think it's true, Zion, and I'm going to hold you to that. But we're going to get this episode started like we get every episode started, Zion. This is a little bit different than you're used to. We're going to have another icebreaker. This one, I might have a prop for this. I'll let you all in on that here in just a second. Give me your all's favorite holiday and why. Who wants to go?
I'll go. I'm gonna go Christmas here. I think especially now, I feel like it's not just about like the presents; it's about the time with family. That's like such a heartfelt answer and like very yeah. But I have to go with Christmas. I think the weather, like the snow, and I hate the winter, but I like the snow, and I love the family aspect.
That's understandable. I like that. Thomas, what's your answer?
I'm gonna, I don't know, there's a lot of good options out there, but I'm gonna second Christmas. It's the most wonderful time of the year. Mm-hmm. We got my birthday next week, so that's always fun.
Happy early birthday,
thank
Thomas.
you.
We'll get you that next week.
Appreciate it.
I'll have a cake next time.
I will definitely take part in that. But I got my birthday, presents, giving presents, spending time with the family, New Year coming up. Can't go wrong with Christmas. And I like that it's like, I'm not saying winter. I'm saying Christmas specifically. Christmas is, it's brief, it's quick, it's a good moment, I think, for everybody. So Christmas.
I like it. Zion, what do you have for us today?
I think it's Thanksgiving. Mainly, I love food. So like,
Very valid.
I think that's my number 2.
Like we're there. I'm not a winter person, so Christmas is just a little too cold for my taste. Mm-hmm. And you got to think, like, with Christmas, there's expectations. People are judging what you give them. Thanksgiving, if you cook, if it's like really bad, people might judge. But for the most part,
I've definitely judged people on their Thanksgiving.
I have too. But like 90% of the meals don't get judged at all.
Understandable.
Zion has the takes on Thanksgiving and basketball. Oh my God!
I'm just saying.
There's a reason we brought him here today, guys.
You just chill out and eat. Like, it's fun, but to also get to see your family the way you do on Christmas.
I can totally understand that. Well, you guys picked Christmas, you two, and so I'm gonna
What's happening?
Here's the prop.
get my
Oh, there it is.
Santa hat out. I mean, it might as well be Christmas time already, ladies and gentlemen. Christmas starts the moment Thanksgiving ends. It is Christmas time from Thanksgiving Day all the way to December 26th.
A little behind the scenes here. Hayden brought that to Gainbridge Fieldhouse on Sunday.
I didn't mean to. I did not mean to bring it. I accidentally pulled it out.
He was going to do it in the discussion. He didn't pull it out.
I really thought about it, and I might end up doing that at some point this season. I'm going to have it in my bag, and we're going to be ready to go. Well, that's a great way to get the episode started. So let's go back in time here a little bit. Back to New York City, guys. The Empire Classic. Indiana went 1-1, lost to the UConn Huskies, defending national champions in the first game, and then bounced back decently against the Louisville Cardinals. It was certainly a back-and-forth effort. Indiana trailed in that one. But really, before we get into that, all four of us went to New York City. I know, Thomas, you're from the area. Audrey, you've been there before. Zion, I believe you've been there before as well. Yeah. I mean, I got to ask you, what was your favorite part about New York?
Go, Zion.
I was going to say, I didn't do that much during this trip outside of the basketball. Like, I kind of just walked around a little bit. I didn't go to anywhere great. So it'd probably just be being in Madison Square Garden. I liked being there for the games. being there when Max A. Smith hit the game winner against Louisville in that Texas-Louisville game. I finished up my story, got to catch the last 5 or 6 minutes of that game, and just sitting down amongst the fans, just sitting there and watching a game winner in MSG. That's a moment I'll never forget.
It doesn't get better than that. Thomas, what you got?
I don't even really know where to start with this. I was looking forward to this since the start of the season. It was an unforgettable experience. Part of going, like you mentioned, is I'm from New Jersey, so I got to go home and just go back and forth for a couple days. That was awesome. My favorite part, not to piggyback off Zion's answer, but was just being in MSG, but for another reason, obviously, diehard Knicks fan, and seeing not only just seeing the Hoosiers perform there, but reporting for them while being in Madison Square Garden, one of my favorite places on earth. That was truly unbelievable, and I'm very grateful for that experience.
I'm kind of going back to the family aspect. I got lucky because my sister lives there, so I got to stay with her. Both of my aunts and my uncle on my mom's side came down with my cousins, so I got to go have dinner with them. Just walking around, I think also it literally cannot get better than covering a game in Madison Square Garden. I think just sitting there and just actually the realization that you're there was just so cool. And yeah, I think that's probably the best part about it.
I think for me, I was a tourist walking around the entire time because I've never been to New York City in my life, so it was a lot of firsts for me. So I mean, the entire trip was absolutely breathtaking for me. I mean, the plane ride going in and seeing the city out of the window for the first time, that's a feeling I'm never going to get back. And especially, I was grateful enough that my dad came along with me because he got jealous that I was going to go to New York City without him. So
that was a great story, by the way.
Yeah, so he had to tag along with me. But going to the top of the World Trade Center was an unbelievable experience. And seeing the top of Manhattan from that high up, it was absolutely breathtaking. I can't put it into words with how incredible it was to see all of those buildings up there at one time. So now that we have done talking about all of our experiences, let's talk about the basketball that we saw. Guys, that UConn game, it looked like Indiana might had been able to break through time and time again. They brought it within 7 points, just wasn't able to pull off the victory. And then Louisville, another game that just really didn't look like Indiana was really playing their best basketball, but ended up pulling off the victory. What do you all think was really learned about this team during this trip? Audrey, Thomas, I'll start with you guys.
I mean, I can say something real quick. With the UConn game, I don't know if we necessarily learned it from the UConn game, but it was definitely evident in the UConn game again. Foul trouble is a very real thing for this team. And against UConn, X had 2 fouls in the first 2 minutes, and that threw off their entire game plan for the rest of the game. That same game, Renew fouled out with 7 minutes left, and they went on to lose by 20. Those are 2 guys that Indiana can't afford to lose. And skipping ahead a little bit to Louisville, it was
there you go.
it was a similar issue. McBacco now had the foul trouble, 2 fouls with less than 2 minutes into the game. He only ended up playing 9 minutes that game. Foul trouble was probably the most notable thing I saw from MSG.
Yeah, I think it's the same answer for everybody is foul trouble, honestly. I don't know if Indiana would have won necessarily, even if Malik Renew did stay in the game, but I think it would have been a much different score if he did end up staying in the game. He was on fire, and he was one of the biggest parts of that game. And Xavier Johnson, we've seen it in these first couple games that Indiana has not performed as well when Xavier Johnson isn't in the game, and that is without your leader, which is understandable. So, I mean, I think Empire Classic went as everybody would have expected. I think we were all talking about it, that it would probably be UConn beating Indiana and then Indiana playing Louisville. But Louisville was that close to Texas. That was actually very surprising, I think, to many. But then the Louisville game was definitely looked a lot better for the Hoosiers.
I think the main thing that I learned, and I don't know if this is a real takeaway or not, but I'll go with 2 things. One, Indiana still isn't ready to play a team like Connecticut, which it's not really a slight because this is a UConn team that hasn't lost a non-conference game since March of 2022. They beat everybody in their non-conference last year, struggled a bit in the Big East, then they got to the NCAA tournament, ran through everybody. They're running through everybody again this year. I think they play Kansas. I can't remember if that's a home or away game on Friday, but that'll be a game to watch. They're at Kansas.
So the Kansas fans I saw are already camping out there.
Yes.
Could you imagine students here in Bloomington camping out in Assembly Hall?
I feel like it would make people, more people go to the game. I think that's the aspect that people don't want to stay out in the cold.
Could you imagine just sleeping in Assembly Hall? I don't know what you would do for food, but I don't care. I'm sleeping
that does sound kind of cool.
That's incredible. So continue on.
So just on the UConn point, I mean, if they win that game against Kansas, you really got this team here saying they just don't lose to teams that aren't in the Big East. So that just is what it is. But the other main thing I feel like was solidified, especially in the UConn game, was that Malik Reneau is the number one option on this team. The way they played with him, the way in the first half, specifically when the game was still in reach, we mentioned his foul trouble. It was unfortunate, and that's something he knows he still has to clean up. But in the first half, he just went at Alex Carabin time after time after time. Carabin's the guy that is, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, probably would have played more small forward than he did power forward. But now he stretches out, and against Malik Reneau, he just was not strong enough to stop anything, and Reneau just got to the paint and to the bucket at will. So I think we really learned in that game, and even carrying over to the Harvard game eventually, we'll get to it, that Malik Reneau is now the number one guy on this team, and it doesn't really feel like there's much of a question about it anymore.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of that a little bit. I say Indiana's front court is essential to their success this season. And, I mean, that was something that everybody really had in the back of their mind. They knew Indiana's front court was probably going to be the number one option this year. And, I mean, between Malik Reneau and between Kel'el Ware, whenever both of them are playing well, Indiana is a really difficult team to stop. And we've seen that Malik Reneau has become one of, I believe he is Indiana's leading player in assists on the season.
Yes, he's leading them in points and assists right now.
That's incredible, especially coming from a big. I feel like I've said this before in the podcast. I was a little skeptical about Indiana's play coming into this season because I didn't think they had a guy in the front court like Trace Jackson-Davis last year who had the ability to become a playmaker. And Malik Reneau has been proving me wrong as of right now. Granted, Indiana's really only played one considerable good top 25 team in UConn. But soon enough, and especially coming up after the Maryland game on Friday, Indiana's going to learn what kind of team they are very, very quickly. I mean, you look at Kel'el Ware as well. He had 11 points, did not score a single field goal inside the arc against UConn, backed it up with 12.7 rebounds against the Louisville Cardinals, and then had 28 points against Harvard, only missing one field goal the entire time. I think he's another big key to success for Indiana's future this season and how they can really take that next step forward and potentially settle down and really get everything going. So I didn't really want to touch on the Empire Classic as much as we did, but we'll roll with it. Let's go to what happened on Sunday in the Harvard game. Again, Thomas, you weren't there, but you watched the game. Us three, we were there. We all know what really happened. I'll ask you all, what did you like about Indiana's play during the Harvard game? It was a game that Indiana, once again, that first half didn't really look too pretty, but the second half is really where they started to come into their own and really play their best basketball, whoever's ready to go.
I can go. I'll piggyback off what you just said about Ware and Reneau. Just that's what I liked in the Harvard game is how well those two played together. Ware had 28 points, Reneau had 17, and they were feeding off each other well. The buddy ball system that Mike Woodson and they all have talked about was in full effect. And slight plug, by the time this is out, or tomorrow, Friday morning, I will have an article about that. So if you're going to want to go read that, I think it's good. Those two are working together in a similar way that we saw Race Thompson and Trace Jackson-Davis work together so well for many years. And it's really interesting to see the way that they work off each other, whereas we just mentioned Reneau being the first option. He has a lot of post-ups, and you really can't send two at him because there's a 7-foot giant standing at the rim anytime you want to send two at him. And even if you bring help defense and your help defense is on point, it's a guy that's like 6'5", 6'6", coming from the opposite corner to help. It just doesn't affect Kel'el Ware when he's 4 feet from the basket. So watching those two play together, watching them dissect the zone that Harvard played for most of that game was really impressive to me.
I'll quickly go off of that. You just briefly mentioned the zone that Harvard played. I mean, you got to think, granted, Harvard really didn't have too much success with the zone against Indiana on Sunday, but you got to think teams know how Indiana plays. They know how they're not a good.
They're going to pack the paint all year long.
Exactly. They're going to pack the paint because Indiana has not proven that they can beat teams from outside the arc. I don't believe they really will prove that the entire season unless they have that one game where their shot's really falling. But when teams are really doing that, and if Indiana between Kel'el Ware and Malik Renew can figure out that zone like they did against Harvard, it's just going to create even more problems.
Mm-hmm. I think I have to go along with you guys and talk about the buddy ball and just the big men. I think something to note was Mackenzie Mbako finally had a breakout game of sorts, and it seemed like he was finally very, very comfortable on the court. Looking at comfortability, Kel'el Ware, that was also something that I talked a lot about in the beginning of the season, was how comfortable he was getting later on in the exhibitions and in the first games of the season. I mean, he was 12 of 13 in field goals and 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 blocks, 3 steals. I mean, his stat line was absolutely crazy. And with Malik Renew and Kel'el Ware together, that front court. And then when Mbako starts to really find his groove, it's going to be a very, very scary front court, which I think I said in the roundtable. Subtle plug. But anyway.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I wasn't able to go to that game, unfortunately, but I did watch it, and what stood out to me stood out to you guys clearly, and stood out to probably anyone who looked at the stat sheet. I'm going to start with Kel'el Ware. I don't know if anyone specifically said exactly what he had, but 28 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 blocks, and 3 steals in 32 minutes. Like
12 of 13 shooting as well.
12 for 13 shooting, and the one shot he missed, he got his own rebound and put it right back in. So, and he broke some sort of record, and it's bothering me that I'm blanking on it. But it was some sort of historic game for Ware, and that definitely stood out. I was going to talk about Mbako, but Audrey hit a lot of the points that I was going to. Yeah, he looked much more comfortable that game than he did to start the season. A lot of people think he started slower than maybe they expected. So it was nice to see Mbako to have a great game, especially heading into Maryland and Big Ten play tomorrow.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, Mike Woodson has said it throughout almost every single press conference that we've attended so far this season, and he's correct. Mackenzie Mbako is a freshman, and you knew it was going to take him a little bit of time to get comfortable and to get acclimated with the speed and the pace of the college game, and it really was a great sign to finally see him really calm down and hit some shots that Indiana fans have probably been looking for, and he's been hitting those shots now. And hopefully it is a game that can carry over to the rest of the season, and he can really get a lot more comfortable and could potentially be either the second or third option on the team going throughout the rest of the season, which I believe he has all the tools to be. A big storyline that came out of that Harvard game as well is Xavier Johnson, and not coming out of the locker room after the halftime break for quite some time, and then whenever he finally emerged was in warm-up gear and had ice over that left foot. It was the right foot that he broke last year against Kansas. Zion, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's correct.
Broke the right foot. So it's the opposite foot now. Mike Woodson said they're still reevaluating him. He's more than likely probably going to be a game time decision for tomorrow. Can only imagine he's going to be questionable on the injury report once again. What does this IU offense and defense look like with and without X? Mike Woodson has been adamant it is now next man up mentality for the Hoosiers.
Yeah. I mean, I think it speaks for itself. I mean, Xavier Johnson, I said it before, he is the leader of this team. And I think that it's been a lot through these games that he hasn't been able to play to his full capacity. And it's been kind of shown on the court, honestly. So I don't think that's anything that we could know right now what they will and won't look like because they haven't actually had to deal with the fact of him possibly being out. So I think if he is able to play tomorrow, we're on Friday against Maryland, that will be a big tell to see how that will look for the rest of the season. If he's not able to play, same exact thing. It'll be a big tell to see how the team, what's the word I'm looking for? Evaluate, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. It's on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, how the team can
How to
play,
operate.
how to operate,
Yeah.
and kind of how they'll adjust. Thank you.
There you go.
Got it. How they will
We got
adjust.
to it eventually.
I got it.
Zion Thomas, what do you have?
Yeah, I think I just don't see how this team wins very many of these big games without Xavier Johnson in the lineup. I think Ja'Kai Newton. First of all, you look at the numbers. The Hoosiers didn't fill their last scholarship spot coming into the season. Ja'Kai Newton was a guard they wanted to trust coming into this year. He's out indefinitely with his knee injury. So you're down two spots, and now if Xavier Johnson's out, you're down another guard. And it leaves a lot of the burden on Gabe Cupps, who, you know, his energy and his defense has been really strong, but he's shown us nothing offensively, scoring or playmaking to say he can really carry the load as a point guard right now, especially in huge Big Ten games or in games against Auburn and Kansas. My goodness, I don't know if Xavier Johnson's injury is supposed to be that long, but just thinking of the idea of that of a freshman, of starting two freshmen, one of them at the point guard spot against a team like Kansas, that's not what you want. So without Xavier Johnson, I'm really unsure of what this team can do. Obviously, with him, there's a little bit more certainty. He's been up and down this year, but you still know that is a guy that's been around. At the very least, he's going to attack the basket and make plays for others, and which is something right now we haven't really been able to say about Gabe Cupps.
Yeah, I mean, Zion said it great. Gabe Cupps is definitely going to have a larger role for the rest of the season. I will say someone that we haven't really mentioned that we definitely should be talking about is Trey Galloway. He definitely is going to have to step up much in a much bigger role than he has so far, and not necessarily to fill X's shoes because he still has his own shoes he has to fill, but he, at least in the leadership aspect, he needs to take the reins, and X, of course, is still going to lead off the court if it does come to that, but Trey is now the sole leader and captain of this team on the court. And, you know, these guys, a lot of them are young. A lot of them are freshmen and sophomores and don't have the experience, or at least nearly the experience that Trey has. And Trey is really going to have to step up going forward.
Yeah, I mean, speaking about X, I mean, you can't really replicate the amount of experience that he has on this Indiana roster. Guys that has been in the game for now 6 seasons. I mean, he knows a lot more than anybody out there on the court besides somebody like obviously Mike Woodson. I mean, but he's on the sideline. But I mean, Xavier Johnson, he's a vocal leader there on the court, a huge defensive presence at times. And like you said, Zon, has the ability to just go get a bucket for IU whenever they really need it. He can attack the basket, at least draw a foul and slow down the time.
He's great at drawing those fouls.
Exactly. And I'll go even further than that. He's great at selling them as well.
Yes.
I think he is easily one of the best players, could potentially in the Big Ten at selling.
He's a great. My favorite word to use. He's a great grifter.
Yes.
That's what I like to call it. He's a grifter.
This is exactly why we brought Zion Brown into the podcast today. But talking about, like I said earlier, about what Mike Woodson has been saying this morning in the Zoom availability. There was a question mentioned about Indiana's lack of three-point shooting, and is it really an area of concern for Indiana, a team that is 349th in the NCAA in three-point percentage, shooting 24% from beyond the arc? Granted, as Mike Woodson said, if this is a team, they could end up being that one team that defies the odds and makes the tournament, even though historically that just has not been there. 60% of their points come from within the arc. Is this really a concern for Indiana?
I think it would be a concern for any team, but I think it's something that they're working on. Again, Mike Woodson said that they're working on it just as much as they work on free throws and literally anything else in practice. But I think that they also found a way around it. They scored 50 plus points inside the paint against Harvard. And I mean, they are working around it. So I think the more they do practice it in practice and throughout the rest of the season, I think it will continue to get better for them. But I think it would be an area of concern for anybody in the NCAA. But they're working around it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that take. All you can do is just keep practicing and wait for them to start falling, and that's what Indiana's doing. They hit 4 for 15, and that is better than they have been shooting in past games. So, although it is a small improvement, it is an improvement. But yeah, I don't. It's still early in the season. It is, like Audrey said, it is an area for concern. And I think most teams would be concerned, but we are still in November as of today, so there's still room to adjust.
Yeah, the concern comes with just how big of a disparity it's been between Indiana and their opponents. And the Harvard and Louisville games, I don't think it was that bad. But you look at it and just the amount of threes that IU's opponents are making and taking. Indiana's opponents are making about 35% of their threes, and they're taking almost double the amount of threes that IU attempts. That is an issue. That it just becomes a math equation at some point, and you get lost. And Mike Woodson did acknowledge that he hasn't been proud or hasn't been happy with the 3-point defense. And so one way or another, or maybe a little bit both ways, that gap does have to shrink in some way. I just don't think you can win a lot of games, on the margins when you have that big of a disparity between three-pointers made and attempted on both sides. But what I will say is that, like we talked about, the way that those two big men have worked together down low, the way that Audrey mentioned the 50 points in the paint on Sunday, they can mitigate some of their offensive issues with that. But it's just when that other team goes off and takes 33s against Indiana, that's when you start to get a little bit worried.
Yeah, I saw a stat out there that said that Indiana's opponents that they've played have made more threes than Indiana has attempted on the season thus far, which, again, that's just not I don't believe that's a recipe for success, especially whenever you get to March. It's something that I've talked about a lot, is that teams historically have gone deep in March with both their guard play and their ability to knock down the three-point shot. I go back to all the time. Michigan State, they're a team that has always had really great guard play, and they've also had the ability to knock down the three-point shot consistently year after year. And that's exactly why you always see Tom Izzo and the Spartans always go deep in tournament success. They experience that, and I just don't believe that's what Indiana has really been experiencing. But like you all said, whenever you have guys like Kel'el Ware and Malik Renew, Mackenzie Mbako potentially, and they have the ability to dominate the post, Indiana's going to see success in that aspect.
I agree, but looking at this, it's definitely an area of concern, but I don't know if it's going to be fixed right away. I don't think it's like with Xavier Johnson, with the possibility of being out, I think that they're going to continue to focus more on their big men. And that's how they've worked. That's how they have been successful throughout the season. And I think we'll continue to see more looks to Kel'el Ware, Malik Renew, Mackenzie Mbako more than we will with the guards. And I don't think that there will be any more improvement as of now, maybe a little bit, but I don't think that's going to be a main focus right now. Honestly.
Well, Big Ten play officially begins this Friday. The Indiana Hoosiers welcome in the Maryland Terrapins, a team that really dominated at home last year, only lost one game at home, and that was to UCLA. They were a much different team on the road. They went 22-13 overall, lost to Alabama in the round of 32. They really haven't been up to the success, at least I personally thought that they would be at currently. I believe they're 4-3 to start off the season. They still have a great guard in Jameer Young, and I think that's really going to go a long way. But outside of that, Zion, I'm really going to defer to you here, so be ready to go.
I'm ready.
This Maryland team, what does Indiana really need to expect?
I think you expect a team that does a lot of its work inside. Similarly to Indiana, they take more threes than Indiana, but right now they're shooting a worse percentage. They're at 23.8% from deep this year.
I didn't know it could get worse.
It can somehow, some way. But yeah, this is a team. You mentioned Jameer Young. He's not a great shooter, but he gets inside. They've got Julian Reese, who has been really excellent so far for them this year. This Maryland team likes to do a lot of its work inside, and you mentioned it. They've struggled this year. They started the year off 1-3 after losses to Davidson, UAB, and Villanova.
That Villanova game, I can push that one to the side a little bit, but
They got embarrassed in that game,
Yeah.
too.
Exactly.
It wasn't even that they lost.
17 points.
Yeah.
Again, though, it's on the road in the pavilion, so that's where I kind of give them a little bit of leeway. But the losses to UAB and Davidson, I think, are somewhat inexcusable. Really close losses at that, both within one possession, both within 3 points, actually, and a neutral site.
Yeah, man, and they have bounced back. Not that they've played anybody, that UMBC, South Alabama, and Ryder, but they have won those 3 games and taken care of business in those games. But I'm just really interested to see this Indiana defense, which we know has struggled against this Maryland offense. Has been way worse than anybody expected it to be. I mean, this is a Maryland team that some people picked as high as 2 in the conference outside of Purdue. So when you look at them, you're looking at a team that wants to do a lot of stuff inside, and that so far has been defensive oriented.
Despite the slow start for the Terrapins on the season, once again, they're at 4-3. They've lost those 2 games to UAB and Davidson. Beyond that, like Zion said, they've taken care of business for the most part. For Indiana, is this a team that is really ready for Big Ten play? Because Indiana is also, they're 5-1, but it might not be the start that most... I keep on coming back to it. They are 5-1, and we can't disregard that, but you have to actually look at the games and look at the way they've won these games. Are they ready for Big Ten play?
I think if they're playing the right game to start off their Big Ten play, honestly. I will say, I mean, they're coming off of a weekish off. Like they've had a bit of time off, whereas Maryland played on Tuesday. And I will say Maryland has won 3 games in a row. You could say that they're on a hot streak. So I think this game will be very, very interesting to see how Indiana is willing to play, especially with the fact that Xavier Johnson might not be healthy. I mean, Mike Woodson did say Malik Renew is definitely healthy. He did have some back issues during Harvard. So to see that, I think the main focus, again, I said before, will be on how the big men play, and they will be focusing more on them. And it will be interesting to see if Mackenzie Mbako does have another game like he did against Harvard. I think this game will be very interesting to see if Indiana is ready for Big Ten play.
I think Audrey said it best. Are they ready for Big Ten play? It depends. Are they ready for Purdue? No. Are they ready for Maryland? Yeah, I think they're ready for Maryland.
That's the thing. You just got to be ready for Maryland.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, one
If you're
game
ready
at a
for
time.
Maryland, you're ready for everything.
Yeah.
That's not what I said.
But yeah, no, Maryland, they're coming off a 3-game win streak. Not the most impressive 3-game win streak, but a 3-game win streak at that, and
They're feeling good.
it should be a close game. I mean, Indiana's coming off a 2-game win streak themselves, and yeah, I think they're ready for Maryland. Big Ten play in general, I think that's a little too vague to say for this team, but I'm gonna say yes, they're ready for tomorrow.
Zion, what do you have for us?
I mean, yeah, I think what does ready mean? I guess is my.
Are they? What I'm really looking at is, are they ready for the physicality that that Big Ten play usually brings, especially not if they don't have Xavier Johnson. They don't really have somebody that has seen it for a considerable amount of time. Of course, Malik Renew saw Big Ten play last year, but he didn't see it in the amount of minutes that he's going to more than likely get Friday night.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
I think they are slightly ready. I could be proven wrong. They might get blown out tomorrow night. But I do think they are ready for at least the physicality. You're not going to see too many more teams more physically imposing than UConn just was. And so I do think they're ready for that part of the game. But we'll see how they actually gel together in a matchup like this.
Well, Indiana will see a familiar face on the other side of the hardwood, Jordan Geronimo, who spent 3 seasons with the Hoosiers, known as a high flyer here in Bloomington. I go back to the one play. I don't believe it was last year. I believe it was the year before, so it would have been his sophomore season whenever it was a free throw and he slapped it down
That was
onto the
against
floor.
Maryland.
Wow. Look at that. I'm just bringing it up at the right time. I knew that. Slapped it down on the floor, went back up and went in. lot of memories with Jordan Geronimo.
I think I have a literal Snapchat memory of that play. I happen to be filming.
That is amazing. But a lot of memories with Jordan Geronimo. We prefaced this before the podcast. I do have a little bit of a trivia question that I'm really curious if anybody knows the answer to. Zion, you're probably going to get this pretty quickly. I don't know. I'm ready to see who was the last former Hoosier to score against Indiana after they transferred away to a new team, played Indiana. Who was the last Hoosier to score against the Hoosiers? I will.
All I gotta say is this is definitely for Zion.
I assume this is in my lifetime.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
I will say it was in the last 5 years.
Okay.
So there's two players that Indiana has played where it was a player that
I don't get this.
There's been two players that have played Indiana that have transferred out and then played the Hoosiers in the next couple seasons. One of them played, did not score. Another one played and did score. One is from
All right. I have a guess.
Go for it.
Is Joey Brunk the answer?
He got that quicker than I thought he would. Man, I thought we were going to go a little bit longer. Yes, it was Joey Brunk. Joey Brunk scored 6 points against the Hoosiers 2 years ago.
I remember
Who was the other player?
Was that the game in Bloomington?
In Bloomington, because they didn't play. At least all I know is that Joey Brunk did not play Indiana.
They did go to Ohio State that year, so Joey Brunk didn't play in that game.
He did not play that game.
I was in studio for WAOX for the one in Bloomington.
Do you remember who was calling the game?
It was during winter break, so it would have been somebody that lived close. My best guess was like Derek Decker and Max Parker or somebody like that. I don't know, but yeah, I do remember being in studio in that game. There was like a 3 or 4 minute stretch for like Joey Brunk and Trace Jackson Davis were just going back at each other, back and forth.
Yeah, Trace threw the ball off of his head while Joey Brunk was out of bounds. That is one play I remember very vividly. Joey Brunk was the player that scored 6 points. Now the other player. Now I want you all to get this. I'm letting this drag on a little bit more. We got some time. So this player was transferred to a non-conference school a couple years ago, and they played. I won't say the year, but they played within the last 2 years. They played Indiana on the road. I will preface.
Oh, I know the answer.
I
was
swear
there.
it's on the tip
I
of
was
my
there.
tongue.
You were there.
I mean, it's going to take me a while.
He played at Indiana, I want to say it was 1819 or was it 1920 he transferred?
He would have transferred to give away another hint, like in between Archie Miller and Mike Whitson. So he would have transferred in 2021.
So, okay. He didn't play an incredibly large role. He came off the bench, but was kind of a spark plug. I have a feeling. Do you all yield?
This is great podcasting.
I plead the fifth.
Yeah, I'm gonna yield for the sake of the podcast.
Sake of
It's
time.
gonna bother
For
me.
the sake of
Ready?
time.
1, 2, 3. Jerome Hunter.
Yeah, I was at that Xavier game last year, and I caught it, so I remember prepping with that.
Yeah, he only played 4 minutes. Did not score against the Indiana Hoosiers. I believe. Is he injured right now?
I think he's missing this whole year. I forget what the injury is.
And it's his last year, isn't it?
Or they might. I don't know. They might give him another one.
True.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's tough to see from a former Hoosier, Jerome Hunter, another player that has given Indiana a lot of great moments. So now we're going to go to one of our favorite segments here in the Throwing Chairs, a very controversial segment in our player or players to watch for the upcoming game against the Maryland Terrapins. Zion, I'll actually start off with you. I'm going to throw you on the spot right now. Who is your player or players to watch?
Is this my player to watch on Indiana or on Maryland?
On Indiana. Sorry.
Okay.
You're new to this.
I go straight to Kel'el Ware.
Okay.
It's a big center matchup between him and Julian Reese. And I don't want to say he lost the big man matchup to Donovan Clingan, but he didn't play well enough. I'll say
he didn't
that
outperform him.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. And Clingan wasn't great either, but Clingan just has obviously much more talent around him, so it didn't matter. But Ware didn't play well enough for Indiana to compete in that game. obviously Maryland doesn't have the talent that UConn has, but I think a lot of this game is going to come down to Ware versus Reese, and we just need to see Kel'el Ware play like he has been, and we talk about those work ethic things with him that have plagued him in the past. Just show that he can get up for a big time game and really outplay another really strong and talented center.
I was going to say Kel'el Ware as well, but I'm not going to. I'll go on a different route. But going on Kel'el Ware, I think this will be a really big game to tell because some of the bigs in the Big Ten are the biggest. And I think this is going to be a good start for both Indiana and Kel'el Ware to start with Julian Reese, and this will be a big matchup. So, but besides Kel'el Ware, I'm going to go with Trey Galloway, especially if...
Is this Kel'el Ware and Trey Galloway?
No, because I'm going different because I don't want to...
Okay.
I will say one. I'm going to go Trey Galloway. Because, oh my gosh.
Thomas, we have one. We have one.
So I'm going to go with, because I think... It sounded like, I don't want to say anything. I think Xavier Johnson will definitely be questionable. If he plays, it won't be as many minutes as he usually does. So Trey Galloway is about to get a lot of minutes like he did against Harvard. I want to say he had 36 minutes against Harvard, which is crazy.
Yeah, he did.
So that'll be a big tell if he's able to actually score in the basket and maybe make some threes. I think it'll be a very big tell.
I usually like to ride the hot hand for the players to watch and just go with people who are performing well and like to wishful thinking, hope they continue to perform well. And so that would have been Kel'el Ware. I'm not going to do that. I was going to do Trey Galloway, but Audrey once again we're on the same page, I guess.
You can pick the same. Yeah.
No. I like to mix it up. Great minds think alike. So
There
Audrey
you
has
go.
Trey Galloway. I'm gonna go with Gabe Cupps. I don't mean to speculate, but as Audrey said, X is questionable to say the least.
Does Zion have any breaking news he wants to break on the podcast right now? Any insider?
I know just as much as you guys do.
Any
I have no clue.
insider information?
But Cupps, without a doubt, his role is only increasing every game, and especially at this point, he's a freshman, he's young, and we touched on his offense and defensive, what he could bring to the game earlier. I think that's definitely going to be under the spotlight starting tomorrow, and I'm going to give Cupps the player to watch. I don't mean to speculate, but he could be starting.
Yeah.
So.
Which, that'd be huge for him, especially going into Big Ten play. I am going to go with a player that is looking that he could potentially gain his confidence and could carry it over after a good performance against Harvard. I'm going to go with Mackenzie Mbako. I think if he can ride that high that he had against Harvard and go into this game against Maryland, he could be a big difference maker for Indiana. If he can knock down his shots, I think that could produce an Indiana victory against Maryland. And talking about Indiana victory, we're going to now give our score predictions. So let's go up and down the line. I believe, I can't remember which one of you I hit on first.
I think you
last
did
time
me
around.
Yeah, it
last.
wasn't me first last time.
I'm going to look at Zion. Zion, do you have a score prediction for us?
Am I allowed to give an X and a non-X prediction here?
Yeah, go for it. Go
right.
for it. I liked it.
If X plays, I'm going to pick Indiana in a somewhat ugly 63-58 game.
Wow.
By the way, this game is going to last longer than 2 hours probably. Both these teams get to the free throw line a lot. I was just looking. Julian Reese shoots 8 free throws a game.
Oh,
Which
wow.
is, 40-minute game, and he's only playing 29 minutes a game.
What time does the game start? 7
o'clock.
Yeah, I doubt it's over at 9 o'clock. That is my main prediction.
Okay.
But so yeah, if X plays, I'll say 63-58 IU. If he does not play, I am going to give Maryland a slider, let's say 61-58 edge in this one.
Okay.
Close game, either way.
Are you writing these in or?
I'm
writing them. It's
We'll go.
fine.
We'll go.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Thomas, Audrey?
Okay. I haven't even thought of this. I think either way, I think Indiana comes out on top of this one. I think Indiana has had a longer amount of time to prepare, and they're back in Assembly Hall. So are we all going to go with or without X?
I like that. I have that written down. So.
Okay. With Xavier Johnson, I am going to go 72-60. Without, I am going to go.
Wow, you're confident. That's a lot of. That's a 12 points.
That's...
I'm gonna. Okay, without, I'm gonna go 65-62, Indiana.
Okay. Thomas, what do you have for us?
Well, I'm gonna give myself the reigning score predictor champ because I had a solo.
Yeah,
I had a solo score prediction that you got in.
Empire Classic.
Pretty good.
Spot on.
So, man, I take these so seriously now, especially after the first week where I spit out a score without thinking about it, and I'm gonna go with X. I like Audrey's call that it'll be not as close as some might think. So I'm gonna go with X. I'm gonna go 75-66. I'm gonna lock that in. 75-66 with X. And then no X, I'm going to make it closer. And I'll take, just not trying to think of your guys' scores. Give me maybe 69-74.
Are we displaying a high amount of belief in IU here, or do we do we just believe very little of Maryland? Which one is it?
No,
A little mix of both.
I think it is. I do think Maryland is on a bit of a hot streak right now, but I also think that Indiana has the advantage of having more time off, and they're back in Assembly Hall. I think a lot of people are going to come to this game. It's a Friday night game. Honestly, I think that they're preparing for the fact of Xavier Johnson possibly being out. So they're either way, they're going to look to more of the big men. I think Kel'el Ware, Malik Renew, big buddy ball game again, and the possibility of Mbako having another big game. So yeah, that is where I'm going off of. I went on a bit of a tangent.
You're about to get a realist right here in Hayden Smith. With X, why are you laughing, Zion? With X, I think Indiana can pull out the victory, but definitely a close one. I've got Indiana winning with X 65-59, a low-scoring game because, again, these two teams. Granted, Indiana has gotten their own, and they've scored almost 70-plus every game this season, I believe. I'm going to quickly fact-check myself on that. No, Florida Gulf Coast, they scored 69 points, so I was just a little off. I'm close enough. I'm going to take a victory where I can get it. Indiana is going to win 65-59 with X. Without X, I have Maryland 68-53. I think without X, Indiana is just going to be lost. They were able to figure it out against Harvard, but that's Harvard. This is a Big Ten team in Maryland that they are way more experienced than Indiana is in a lot of different departments. Without X, I think this team is lost. Granted, they're still going to go down low into their front court with Kel'el Ware and Malik Renew, but I don't think they'll see as much success, especially on the defensive end. So, without further ado, that is going to do it for this episode of the Throwing Chairs podcast. Be sure to follow the Hoosier Network on all of our social media platforms to stay up to date on Indiana basketball. Until next time, alongside Audrey Marr, Thomas Montalbano, and our special guest, Zion Brown. Zion, you're going to have to join us for our...
This was fun.
For our ceremonial exit for the podcast. It's a little bit different than we normally do.
Oh, there's something else here? Okay.
So for one final time, here in Franklin Hall, Audrey Marr. Come on, Audrey. Come on.
I'm here.
Audrey Marr,
Oh my
Thomas Montalbano, and Zion Brown.
What are we doing?
It's like, what the hell? What is going
I'm
on?
Hayden Smith, hanging up the phone. Have a great day, Hoosier fans.